Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Betsy Minnick, and I work in business development and outreach at PolicyMap. I am a librarian who mostly works with our colleges and universities and public libraries, and I am here with my colleague, Eliza Wallace, who is our data development lead. She will be discussing a little bit about one of our newest indicators, which is the Social Vulnerability Index, and we will show you lots of examples about the data that we do have and the new data that we've added that should be of interest to you as you take a look at our webinar. One of the things that we wanted to cover is why people are increasingly using mapping tools and why they're relying on them to visualize what's happening in a specific area. I wanted to let you know that number one, PolicyMap is just US data and mapping, but the ability for our users to easily create maps from the data that they view in tables and look at this data down to the small census tract or on the broad state or nationwide area is really helpful. So PolicyMap will give you the ability to view this data not only in tables, but in pre-formatted reports. PolicyMap will allow you to upload your own place-based data and download our data for use in other statistical tools. We give you the ability to create 3-layer maps and upload your own place-based data and privately share it with others. I'm going to pass off the webinar to my colleague Eliza right now, and she's going to tell you a little bit about the CDC's Social Vulnerability Index.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. So the CDC's Social Vulnerability Index, it was created by the Geospatial Research Analysis and Services Program to help planners, emergency managers, public health officials, and more identify areas where residents are likely to be particularly vulnerable to disasters, to weather emergencies, or to generally have a hard time adapting to those kinds of events. So what you'll see is that the Social Vulnerability Index has an overall score that gives a general idea of what areas where have concentrations of populations that are likely to have a harder time recovering from disasters. And it's also broken down into 4 subcategories that give a lot more information on specifically how those areas might be particularly vulnerable. For example, there's one that shows vulnerability due to household composition, which specifically refers to older adults, youth, and people with disabilities. And so that one could help you understand what areas might have residents who have particular health concerns, health challenges, or may have special needs in terms of how to evacuate an area.
So thank you, Eliza. So as Eliza mentioned, social vulnerability refers to populations that are particularly vulnerable to disruption and health problems. So what you're going to see is that the Social Vulnerability Index ranks 15 different social factors, including poverty, lack of vehicle access, crowded housing. Right here, I have a sample map for you, and you can see that this is the overall social vulnerability level. If you are familiar with the PolicyMap platform, you'll find this underneath the quality of life menu in our categories. And there are several different ways that you can take a look at the social vulnerability level. This is, once again, the overall level as of 2016. But we also have minority status and language as part of it, socioeconomic status, housing and transportation, and household composition and disabilities. You'll find that the SBI index, as we've already discussed, is going to reveal these patterns of disparity across race and income and education. And we're going to just take a look at a few of the sample maps without actually getting into the logging into PolicyMap and showing how you use it. A PolicyMap, you might be aware, is very simple to use and does not require any prior training to use, but from our quality of life menu, you can see exactly here, the overall social vulnerability level. And we're taking a look at Tampa as our example, and you can see that the darker areas are where there's a higher level of social vulnerability. If you break it out by socioeconomic status, you're going to see that this includes the population below the federal poverty level, the unemployed population, per capita income, and population with no high school diploma. So this is going to be just a really good way of looking at exactly what's happening in. When you're in PolicyMap, you can pan and you can zoom in and zoom out and look at this data all the way down to the census tract level. The next example would be social vulnerability level by the household composition category. And again, we're taking a look at the population of age 65 or older. It could be children age 17 or younger, civilians with a disability, and single parent households. So this measure can be used to identify areas with high concentrations of people that might be physically susceptible to health challenges due to adverse conditions, or that may have specific needs for evacuations. The next example is minority status and language ability social vulnerability level. And again, the darker concentrations, the areas of darker purple would be the high vulnerability. And it includes populations that identify as a race or ethnicity other than non-Hispanic, white, and population over the age of 5 that speak English less than well. This measure can be used to identify areas that may need targeted public outreach and information campaigns, or may need interpretation services. And a little bit later on, I'm going to show you some of the demographic data that we do have available on PolicyMap that will actually show you languages spoken in a specific area. The next area of social vulnerability would be housing and transportation access. And it includes the number of housing units and larger multifamily buildings with 10 plus units, mobile homes, crowding, households without access to a car, and populations living in group quarters such as prisons or dormitories. Crowding is defined as the number of housing units with more residents than rooms. And this measure can be used to flag areas where the housing stock may be at risk during a disaster, or populations that may not be able to heed an evacuation order. So there, in addition to the Social Vulnerability Index, PolicyMap has recently updated all of the FEMA disaster declarations. They were updated in just this December of 2018, and they're available for the time period of 2012 through 2018. You can search by disaster areas, by fires, floods, hurricanes, and severe storms. This is a very, very busy map and actually somewhat ugly, but I thought it was just an interesting way for you to take a look at these polygons on our maps and see exactly what's there. It might help you to plan in exactly those areas where you might want to relocate. So if you're thinking about moving to Idaho or Nevada, it looks like you have less of a chance to be a victim of floods and hurricanes and severe storms. As of now. You never know what's going to happen. So just a really, interesting map, and realize that you do not need to view all of these polygons at once, and you can layer them on top of any one of the data layers or data points that we'll be going through throughout this webinar. So here is a map of Louisiana. And we are looking at the housing and transportation access social vulnerability level. And we can overlay this map of Louisiana with the emergency declarations or the floods. And we can look at that as emergency declarations or major disasters. So for here, we can see specific storms that happened, and we can also shade this by specific FEMA declarations for specific years. Okay. Another thing that we can take a look at on PolicyMap is looking at contaminated sites in relation to these flood zones or these FEMA disaster declarations. So you have the ability to add the data points for brownfields, which are former industrial or commercial sites where future use is affected by a real or perceived environmental contamination. And then we also have the ability to also add the Superfund sites. And these are a list created by the EPA, which are placed on the national priorities list. Here is a map, and I believe, let me take a close look. We are still looking in the Louisiana area. We're looking at New Orleans, and we've been able to put our map boundaries on here. So we are looking at the socioeconomic category of the social vulnerability index, and we have overlaid that with areas where there's a high risk for flooding. And in this case, we're thinking about those areas or those social organizations that are available for support during these times of disaster. And so in PolicyMap, underneath several of our different categories, including quality of life and education and health, will give you access to data points where you can search and see where there is a library, where there's a community health center, where there is a university or a nonprofit that would be able to be a place or a haven for during those disaster times. And here we are looking at another recent disaster declaration are the fires in California. We're looking at social vulnerability levels according to housing and transportation categories. In this case, I've filtered this just by the fires that happened in 2018, and we're able to see those specific areas. You'll also note that I've drawn a polygon on this map, and that's another ability that you have through PolicyMap where you're able to go in and create a custom region. You can do it, assemble it yourself by specific census tracts or by counties, or you can do it for a radius around a specific point. In this case, I just created a polygon. And within this polygon, I can go in and I can specifically take a look at each one of those fires in Southern California. It gives me detailed information about the declaration date, the date the incident began and when it ended, and the areas affected. And this can be saved, and you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner of your PolicyMap map that you do have a place to save your data. So if there are specific data sets or custom regions that you'd want it to take a look at, you may go ahead and take care of that. I noticed that we do have a few questions. I'd wanted to just hold off and move to the next section, but I will answer. I do have a question from Angelise about whether or not this data can be downloaded for GIS or into other programs. We do have the ability to download your data, and I do have examples of that where you can download your points and layer data, and you can either download them individually or together, and you can use the FIP codes so that you can import those into other software programs. And we do have an extensive blog that gives you information about that. And I'm going to I have a question from James, and that is that as the factors that build the SVI change, so will the SVI. And how sensitive is SVI to the evolving factors? I am going to defer that to Eliza. She is going to jump on in a little bit when we talk a little bit about internet access, which is one of the factors that will definitely affect the SVI. So I'm going to hold off on that, and she can answer that when she jumps on. Okay, so there are a number of relevant demographic indicators that affect the SVI. And these are also things that you can look at individually on PolicyMap. So you can do research and create maps based on population density. You can take a look at age and specific age groups and where there might be a higher population of people over 65 or over 75, or a higher population of people who are under 18. So that's very easy to do and visualize on the map. We also have the ability underneath our demographic data for you to go ahead and take a look at people with disabilities, and that can be filtered out by age, by employment status, by poverty status, and disability type. Additionally, we talked a little bit about how there are certain factors related to the SVI that if you are dealing with the population whose predominant language is not English or even Spanish, that you will need to have a plan in place to be able to communicate and create a plan for those residents. So there is the ability to visualize exactly which languages are spoken down to the block group, and I will show you an example of that. And additionally, we can also map the sheltered and unsheltered and all homeless using PolicyMap. So here's what I was referring to before. It's a really pretty map, and it's also a very interesting map. We're looking at an area around Newark, New Jersey, and we're looking at the predominant language. I'm not including English or Spanish spoken in the home. So by clicking on any one of these areas, you can see exactly what languages are the predominant languages and where you have different ethnic enclaves. And you can really make determinations on what type of services and support you need. Another interesting thing that you can take a look at using PolicyMap, not only by looking at this SVI, is that you can map subsidized housing data. And you can map this data through demographics, by race and ethnicity, by household type. So if you in fact wanted to find out where there might be a large number of people 62 years or older within an area, you can do that. And you can also map this by rent and income. If you take a look at this, you have a sample map of the percent of the population in subsidized housing that live in a household where a person has a disability. So you can easily go in and you can map this. You can play, in fact, and if I was alive, I would be able to show you that you can play with these ranges. So if I was just looking for those areas where there is a person in a subsidized housing with a disability of over 20%, we could easily just isolate that demographic. I can also map all of these specific data points. And as we talked about before, we can go ahead and we can take a look at these different data points. So where these multifamily housing developments are, where the public housing is, and where low-income housing tax credit houses are. Another area of interest for PolicyMap and for the company that we came from, Reinvestment Fund, is limited supermarket access. I encourage you, after you have a chance to review this webinar, to go ahead and take a look at our blog, because we have a data team that is constantly writing about important issues related to our data. And one of the areas of interest is creating access to healthy food. So we have a recent blog written about creating access to healthy food and stable housing. And in fact, we do have a question from Sage asking about health issues and not just disasters, and locating vulnerable populations who might not have access to healthy foods, who might not have access to stable housing. So I think we'll address some of your concerns right here. If you take a look at this map, we have a map in the Southwest United States. We're looking at the estimated food insecurity rate. And for here, we can really look at the zoomed out level of those areas of concern. And food insecurity is the number of people who don't have access at times to enough food for an active or healthy household members, and that there's not nutritionally adequate foods. So take a look at this map, and you can once again zoom in all the way down to the census. Well, this actually is county level data, but in some cases you can zoom down to the census level, tract level. We also have limited supermarket access areas. And there's a full explanation of this score and how it's calculated, but it's a great way for you to take a look at a specific area, either rural or urban, and see exactly where there are areas where there's limited supermarket access. You can also go ahead and take a look at where there is access to supermarkets. So in this case, we're looking at whether or not there's full service supermarkets or limited service supermarkets. This is an area down in Wake County, North Carolina, and you can see that there's a whole full food desert here, and where there really is not much access to full service supermarkets. And you can see those little purple marks might just be a Family Dollar store or stores that aren't offering fresh fruits and vegetables. Another area of interest and strength for PolicyMap is mapping medically underserved areas. So here we're looking at an area in Oklahoma, in and around Tulsa, where there's a great deal of medically underserved areas. The dark purple indicating that the medically underserved populations by the grayed out purple, and then the yellow sections as the not an MUA or MUP. What I've also mapped here are community health centers and lookalikes. So you can see exactly what's there, and you can always filter on different points. And what you might not know by looking at this map is that when you're looking at a live map, you can click on any one of those data points and find out all the detailed information on those points. And again, all that detail can be downloaded into a CSV spreadsheet. Okay. At this point, I'm going to turn our examples over to Eliza, and she's going to talk a little bit about computer and internet access through PolicyMap.
Hello again, everybody. I just wanted to mention some new data that is available from the American Community Survey that we've folded into PolicyMap for the first time after our December American Community Survey update. This is a set of data that can help you target outreach to vulnerable areas with vulnerable populations. Betsy mentioned language and translation services before. This has more to do with particular types of outreach strategies. So what modes of communication might be the most useful in given neighborhoods for reaching people? So now we have data available on, for example, how many people in an area have a smartphone as their only computer. So here you can see an example around Memphis where the darker purple represent larger populations that have a smartphone and no other kind of computer. So if you were, for example, planning some kind of internet-based outreach, these would be areas that could potentially only really be reached through mobile-first websites. So you can see now this is an area where this is in response to an earlier question. Betsy's going to talk you through in a minute how to download the data. I just wanted to mention with regards to the computer and internet access data that could help determine areas where there's only smartphones available. There's also information on areas where people have no computer access at all. And these are data points that can help determine whether a website, mobile-first technology, text messages, or even print campaigns will be the most successful in getting information to the people who need it most. Betsy?
Thank you, Eliza. So as you can see here, there is information or an example of exactly how you can download the data from PolicyMap. So you can download those layers, those points, or you can join the points together with the data layer. And in this case, you can also choose your location. So I've decided that I just don't want to look at this individual census tract, but I could also look at this Tennessee as a whole or for the entire United States, or I can pull down all that data for Shelby County, or I can use my own custom region. So that just gives you an idea of how you can download it, and it is data that is delivered in a CSV format, and our expert researchers can take down that data and pull it into other tools as well. Here's the sample map, and one thing I haven't talked about is the ability to go ahead and take a look at different data layers and find hotspots. So for instance, I did a quick search very simply and easily where I was looking at per capita income. And I was looking for these areas where in and around Flint, Michigan, where the per capita income is less than $50,000. And then another thing that I thought of when I was thinking about socially vulnerable populations is the percent of housing units which don't have access to a vehicle. And I wanted to see where there is only 25% of the population access to, or who don't have access to a vehicle. And finally, we were taking a look at internet access. So an estimated 50% of the households with no internet access. And as you can tell, it pulls up these specific points on a map. And if I would click on it, it would give me the exact amounts for all of these. It's really, really an important way to figure out which sites or which areas there are of concern within a community where there might be the need for adding more services or looking at ways to plan for disaster-related events. And then finally, I decided to add these data layers. So here, I'm looking at these areas of concern, and I wanted to see where there might be access to community health centers or lookalikes or hospitals for these individuals that don't have internet access, who don't have access to a vehicle, and who are low income, so living below the poverty level. Oops. So that is, I can go live for a little bit, and I can also, Eliza and I would be happy to work with you to answer any of the questions that you have. One of the questions that we did get is whether or not there is an API for accessing PolicyMap data, and yes, if you do have questions about PolicyMap data and our different products, you can go to our main website, and I will actually move there right now. Let's see. Okay, so hopefully you can all see from main PolicyMap. Let's go directly into our main website. There are a few important things that I want you to see. One is information about the data indicators that are here. So if you have information about what data, how it's available, where it's coming from, we are very transparent about the data that is here, and we do break this out into different categories. And you can download a complete list of our data. And if you do have questions about the products that are available, PolicyMap does have subscriptions either through a few seats or for enterprise licenses. And we do have an API and maps and data for your website. Of a special interest, though, would be information about PolicyMap through our blog and through our customer stories. So there's lots of good information here about how other institutions are using PolicyMap to visualize data and look at data within their community. And you can look specifically through housing and community development, public health and healthcare, public libraries, and see exactly how PolicyMap is being used. And finally, we have some really good information from our recent white papers. Hopefully you all get our regular emails and you've had the chance to download our latest white paper, which has to do with good government and doing less with more. And this is really a good starting point for you to understand the types of data that we have and how this data is being used within the government and within people who are working within public health and for their cities and public health organizations. We have a number of questions. Let's see. I have questions about whether or not you can use this in your graduate class, which teaches about assessment of social determinants of health. In fact, yes, that is one of the many applications where PolicyMap is being used. We do have professors at different colleges and universities, and if you take a look at some of our customer stories, you can see exactly how that's being used. And in fact, we have given webinars in the past, and we'd be happy to provide you with a link to that webinar and this webinar within your class. Okay, and Zachary, we have a question from you about Title VI analysis. I'm going to pass this off to my colleague Eliza, and she can let you know.
Hello, thank you, Zachary. So with regards to the Title VI analysis for transit access, we don't have a specific section that deals with that, but we do have a lot of data around demographic information such as minority population, limited English-speaking population that can help you determine what populations might be disproportionately affected by certain programs or certain projects. So we do have some data that would speak to that, certainly.
So I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. We are happy to provide personalized demonstrations. We're also happy to provide trial access to our tool. So if you wanted to take a look and really dig in yourself and see what data is there and how it can be used for your own purposes, certainly let us know. Any member of our PolicyMap team is available to answer questions or to provide you with more information. I really appreciate your time today, and if you have any questions, please feel free to follow up and let me know. And as we mentioned before, we'd be more than happy to provide you with a set of these slides and a copy of this presentation. So thank you so much, and we appreciate it. Eliza is available to answer some more of the questions that are here, so I'm going to pass off the microphone to her. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Betsy. I think Betsy has handled most of the PolicyMap related questions about functionality and features. So I'm going to take on a few of the data questions that popped up. It looks like Lisa had a question about food insecurity rate that Betsy showed and whether that includes transportation access. So the limited supermarket access analysis that our partners at the Reinvestment Fund completed just this past summer, that does include transportation, specifically with regards to how urbanized an area is and what level of car access people have access to. So that's something that if you go on PolicyMap and you explore, there are several data sets that contribute to the limited supermarket access, one of which is the cutoffs that they use for how far a supermarket can be from an area, from a neighborhood, to be considered serving that neighborhood. So for example, in a very dense city with a high rate of no car ownership, then those would be areas that the cutoff would be much smaller than in rural areas that are much less dense. I think James had a question about the social vulnerability index and how sensitive it is to change over time. That's a great question. We just posted the 2016 Social Vulnerability Index, which just came out in 2018. So that means it uses the 12 to 16 American Community Survey as the data that underpins that. Since it uses American Community Survey, that means that it depends on a 5-year window of survey responses. That means that for example, the previous analysis, the 2014 analysis, would not be appropriate to compare this to because of the overlapping data windows. There are older vintages of the score. There is a 2010 version of it, but I would exercise some caution in trying to establish change over time in vulnerability levels without first sort of digging in and seeing if all of the data points are exactly comparable. Erin has a question about where she can find methods and definitions for each data set. That's a great question. Betsy showed I think the page where you can click data indicators on PolicyMap. You can also click data sources underneath of that, and that will lead you to a lot more detail. Looks like she's showing you now. That will lead you to a lot more detail on those data sets. So that's something you can browse. Or when you're looking at a map and you're viewing a specific data set, there are links that you'll be able to click that will lead you to the relevant section of that data directory. I think that those were all the questions that we had. Oh, looks like we just got one from Marie. Let me see if I can read this out. Is the Social Vulnerability Index, oh, it popped up a little bit. It's moving on me. Is the Social Vulnerability Index modulated by more esoteric data sets, for example, like a Google map of San Francisco, where human waste is commonly found? So it sounds like looking for something like local 311 data. It's not. The data that informs the Social Vulnerability Index is all national in scope, and the reason for that is to make sure that it can be really compared across the country. So it sounds like those kinds of data sets, like if you're talking about specific problems with litter or things like that, that would be a more local data set, such as from 311. Rebecca has some more questions about how the Social Vulnerability Index is calculated. So that's a great question. She's asking about how the indicators are weighted and how they're put together into the overall index. So this is another thing that you can find some more detailed explanation in the data directory on. So I'll give a quick explanation here, but there's plenty of room where you can on your own dig in and see how we've explained it, and then you can even get to the original links from the CDC's website if you have really specific questions that I'm not answering here. But basically the summary is they established, the CDC established the factors that they thought would contribute to social vulnerability and difficulty with overcoming sort of adapting to disasters and recovering from disasters that are in those 4 categories. They then translated those into the American Community Survey variables that would most closely match. And the national data set that we've posted is based on a national ranking. So they essentially translated those indicators into percentile ranks across the country, and then summed those percentiles across subcategories, and then finally did that again. So for each of the 4 subcategories, they assigned percentile rankings to the resulting score, and then combined those. So they're, as far as I know, they have not weighted the different sections individually or with different weights, but we do provide the sub-scores. So that's something that, you know, if you're interested in only looking at 1 or 2, that's something you can do yourself, particularly with the help of 3-layer maps. And it looks like we have one more question from Allison, who wants to know whether we will be adding more mental health indicators. We do. That's a great question. We do have a few mental health indicators under our health tab. One data set that, if you're interested in health data, mental health data, that I'd like to highlight is our health indicators. Let's see if we're doing a two-pronged thing here. Betsy's searching while I'm talking. So there we go, poor health days. So we do have some information on mental health. And as we find more data sets that are relevant, that are national in scale, we definitely intend to continue adding more as we find them. And I do want to mention that we have a data set based on the, well, you can see one example here where we have taken the created small area estimates for a number of health indicators based on the CDCs, BRFSS, maybe pronounced BRFS, opinions vary on how that's pronounced, based on that survey data set. And I think that's it. So thank you very much for attending today.
Thank you so much, Eliza, for clearly explaining a lot of the indicators and specifically social vulnerability. I will be sure to follow up with an email providing you a link to this presentation and the slides. I believe there might be one or two questions that might have slid by us, and we'll try and reach out to you all individually as well. But we certainly thank you for your time, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks, and take care.